Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Yakkity Yak Fishing Podcast. Hope you guys doing fantastic today. Uh, we are having some potential issues with Facebook this morning. If you're watching from Facebook, so bear with me for a moment while I try to fix that. That is too bad. All right, well, we're rolling with it anyway. Like I said, hey y'all, welcome back to the Yakkity Yak Fishing Podcast. Today we are talking about gear maintenance and ways to save you money when it comes to fishing in general. I mean, you spend this money to get the gear in the first place. You're out there using it. You're catching these fish, awesome times, having a good time, all that good stuff. But then things start to break, things start to wear down. What can we do to uh, not only save our gear and allow us to continue using the same gear over and over again without having to replace it? But is there things that we can do to save us money? Yes, there is. And it changes from season to season. Because you're bear with me. Be right back. Oh, sorry about that, guys. Morning, Avid. Hope you're doing okay. Uh, if you guys got to go fishing this weekend, hope you had a blast. If you're going fishing today, hope you guys catch some toads. We're all in it together. We're all here trying to fish. We're all trying to better ourselves as anglers. Here to gain the knowledge, here to catch the fish, get the pictures, get the win, if you will. But there are things we can do outside of the fishing day to uh, better prepare ourselves for the next trip. And yeah, so we'll get straight into it here in a minute. Long hours of work, I understand that, man. I definitely understand that. It was a long week for me too. I was off yesterday. I was off today, but work is work. You do what you got to do. I understand that entirely. If you're just coming in, good morning. Again, if you guys are fishing, let me know what you're fishing for. I want to hear about it. Shirley T, good morning. Hope you're doing okay. Brandon's Outdoor Adventures. I hope you're doing fantastic, sir. I don't know when you're going fishing again, but I hope it's soon. I want to hear about it. Tell me about it. Where are you going? What are you going for? And what's your game plan to make it happen? And if you're gonna go fishing at all, the next say you're planning on doing a trip this week, I want to know about it. Put it in the comments below. Let me know where you're going. Let me know what you're going for, and let me know what you're gonna do to make that plan work. You gotta have a plan. You guys were here a couple weeks ago for the game plan episode where we talked about things you can do to make a trip more successful through planning and through prep and spot hunting and all that good stuff, and bringing that all together to produce a pattern to be able to repeat over and over and over again, or to try new things to figure out how it works and try to get yourself in a better spot. Fishing for sleep. Yeah, I bet, man. I do. I bet. I definitely get it. I mean, it's something that everybody needs for sure. That is a fact. Rustic, good morning. Yes, coffee is going to be needed for some people. I was up way too late last night. Uh, had a good time though. Went fishing with Jody. Uh, didn't get on a fish, unfortunately. We weren't out super terribly long. My wife was started not feeling well. But if you were hanging around yesterday, you guys know about the Catfish Sumo Foley Spoon tournament that Trophy Seekers Outdoors was hosting. Mrs. Yak competed in that with Jody yesterday. It is the first tournament that Shayna has ever done by herself, and she had a good time. She caught fish. Actually, she got the most fish on Jody's boat, and even though they didn't win it, they had a had good conversation, had a good time, some good camaraderie, and yeah, she had a blast. And I'm looking forward to having her do more tournaments in the future. Like I said in the beginning, I'm gonna do this one more time. Get back in the roll of things. That cat threw me off for a minute. Sorry about that, guys. Uh, but here we go. Hey, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of the Yakkity Yak Fishing Yak. Wow, I really blew that up. Hey, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of the Yakkity Yak Fishing Podcast. Today, we're talking about gear maintenance and how it can save you money. It's not going to save you as much money as buying quality gear in the first place, but once you get that quality gear, things you can do with it throughout the fishing trips and throughout the fishing season will make it last longer for you, make it work better for you, and in the long run, save you a ton of money. And I should have that loaded already. But we're gonna pull this up and get going with it. Here we go. All right. Like I said, this is anyone can fish. This is gear maintenance. What can we do to save us some money? Rustic, that is the plan. That's gonna be very soon. It's definitely something I got a little more experience from than some people, and it's definitely something I'm passionate about. So it's coming up. It's not. I'm just trying to finish up this beginner series. This actually might be the last episode of it. Uh, just for um people that are getting into the sport of fishing. But getting right into it, real maintenance. All right. There's three things you have to worry about when it comes to real maintenance. It's gonna be lubrication, repair, and cleaning. Now, this is just an example. This is the diagram from a PC Fun Torrent baitcaster reel. You can see here it's taking all the picture pieces apart. It shows exactly how it's taken apart and how it puts back together. And it's just so you can actually do this stuff safely while you're like lubricating it, adding oil to it, or in the case of spinning rods are really bad about it. If you get line stuck underneath the spool itself, then being able to take that apart to get that extra line out of there so we work correctly, but then also being able to put it back together so that way it'll continue working properly is key. And having diagrams like this or videos on YouTube showing somebody cleaning it or taking it apart is going to make it a lot easier for you to repeat the process yourself. This one's not so bad. There's what, three washers, a gear drive, shaft, the case on the outside. Some of these, uh, especially saltwater reels, can get really, really complicated when you start taking the pieces apart. Uh, Generally speaking, the more simplistic the reel, the less parts there is. But you're always gonna have at least some parts. So you're always gonna have a shaft for the crank on the handle. You're always gonna have the handle itself. You're always gonna have the spool. You're always gonna have the washers, the drag washers, and then you're always gonna have the case on the outside. But by having something like this, you can safely take things apart, safely clean it, and but why would you want to? All right. So if you're fishing out there and you're gone trip after trip, you're just slaying all these fish, and eventually your rod or your reel rather starts getting kind of clunky or tight or raspy. You're reeling it in; it's no longer smooth. That's when you want to consider cleaning or lubricating it. Generally speaking, you don't have to do that every season. But if you fish in the rain a lot, if you fish saltwater, especially if you fish saltwater, it does not matter if it's saltwater rated or not. If you fish saltwater, you're gonna have to take your stuff apart more often and clean it more often. And the reason for that, those little gears and stuff on the inside, when they get rusty or dirty, uh, they'll start catching. And when they start catching, that's when you have to worry about your drag not being as smooth anymore, worry about something catching or seizing up and that causing the fish to break your line. I mean, it can cost you fish in a hurry. But on top of that, when it gets rusty and stuff like that, and all the little, it's just like a car motor. You got to keep it running smoothly, got to keep it lubricated. The heat that's generated from fighting fish or from reeling in nonstop over and over and over and over again, that's what causes the failures, right? So taking it apart, cleaning it, lubricating it, that's what prevents that. That's what makes it so it works better for you long term. And if you're out there spending money on, say, a name brand reel, say, or you got one for Christmas, somebody got you an Abu Garcia something or other that cost $120 by itself or something. I don't know about you. I don't have $120 to go out and buy another reel. Especially not if I'm fishing with multiple rods. I do kayak bass tournaments, and so I have between 6 and 8 rods on the kayak for that. I fish catfish tournaments, I usually am running between 4 and 6 rods for those. Those add up really, really quick, especially when you start buying your higher quality stuff. Uh, so I need it to last. I need it to work. I need it to be working at its peak performance. If I'm a football team manager and I'm wanting to buy a quarterback, well, if I want the absolute best one there is, then that's fine. I'm gonna I spend $1 billion recruiting this quarterback that's supposed to be the best in the world, right? Number 1 draft pick, has all the records, all that good stuff. If my team can't back that quarterback up, well, then it's just a waste of $1 billion investment. Just like a fishing rod. I mean, obviously, that was an extreme example, right? You're not hopefully not spending $1 billion on a fishing rod and reel, but if you were, you'd want it to last. You'd want it to work, and that's the key. But lubrication, repair, and cleaning. Repair also. Wow, I can't spell either. Repar. What am I doing here? Uh, if one of those gears breaks on the inside, most companies will have the parts that you can get them and replace them. If it's just a simple washer, then you can even take it down to like Ace Hardware where you can get the single nuts and bolts and stuff and get one to replace it with. I will say if you're doing that though, if you can go back as stainless, I would recommend that because that's gonna help prevent, the rust and corrosion more often. But again, if you're doing saltwater, if you're fishing nonstop, you're fishing multiple trips a month, then you really need to consider doing lubrication, cleaning, and repair on your reels at least once a season. It's not something that's gotta be done every single trip, but at least once a season. And what is a season? I'm talking about if you have a state that allows you to fish from March until November or March through December, that's a season. If you literally can fish year round, okay, so every January, that's the end of the season, beginning of the season, right? Whenever you're renewing your license for the year, that's when you need to do this stuff. Especially before the peak of the year where you go fishing the most. Because that's when it's gonna feel you. When you're out there, you're having fun, you're catching these fish, you hook this big old fish. I mean, this is gonna be the trophy fish of the season, trophy fish of the year. That's when something's gonna break. Never fails. Always on the big fish. There's a reason why those fish stories get worse and worse for people as it goes. But then you got rod maintenance. Well, the rod, let's just be honest here, the rod is gonna be the thing you have to worry about the least when it comes to maintenance because of what it is, right? It is, for lack of better words, a plain stick. It's a stick. If it's not broken, you're probably good. But some things to keep an eye on is the eyelets of the reel where you're gonna have the most issues. The tip of the reel is gonna have potential issue, or sorry, the tip of the rod is gonna have potential issues. And then the handle replacement on the rod is something where is gonna be concerned. And that's not gonna be necessarily an every season thing, but your rod tip is where you're gonna have the most potential for breakage on a rod, where either you're casting these heavy baits that are not rated for the rod, whether you're fighting big fish on accident on a rod that's not meant for it, um, or it most commonly this happens all the time. I'm guilty of it a lot. When you accidentally shut a rod in a car door, I have done it several times with some nice expensive rods. It is not pleasant. It hurts me. It makes me want to cry. Um, Especially when you're 18 and you have nothing else better to do with your money, and you go buy this limited edition. Uh, I don't remember who it was. Bill Dance, maybe, I don't remember. It was somebody out there, one of the bigger bass fishermen. They had this limited edition rod that's supposed to be the absolute best thing since sliced bread. It was less than 200 bucks. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna get that because that's gonna make a difference. It's carbon fiber. I've never used carbon fiber. It's got to make a difference. I'm gonna catch more fish. It's one of those marketing gimmicks that got me because even when I had it, it was not that impressive of a rod. Uh, Not that it was bad per se, but it would definitely didn't make a difference for me personally. And then what do? I shut it in the car door. Yep, snap that tip right off. But they make repair kits for those. So depending on how bad the break is and where it's at and what material it is, you can repair a rod tip break. If you're using something that's a little more, if it's a stiffer rod or a thicker rod, such for catfish or something like that, depending on the rod itself, depending on how the action of the rod is, you could technically just go down to the next eye, cut that off, and just make that the new rod tip. But usually speaking, you're gonna wanna replace that tip if you can. They do make kits out there for each brand and each type and for each material type as well. But like I said, that's not it's not something you're gonna mess with all the time, but it can happen. So just being aware of it makes a big difference. But the biggest thing when it comes to fishing rods is gonna be your eyelets. Now, in this particular example, this one has ceramic rings on those. Those tend to pop out over time. And when that happens, all you have to do is re-cement them in. But the biggest thing with any material eye, especially if you're using braided line or if it's just an older rod, it's gonna wear a groove on those eyes, and that groove is gonna end up being sharp, and that what that can do is cut your line. So, at least once a year, you're gonna wanna take a Q-tip. It's the easiest way to figure out if there's a scratch there if you can't see it, is take a Q-tip and run it around that ring. If you do that, you'll see some cotton get pulled off of the Q-tip, and you'll know, "Hey, that's a sharp spot." So, what do? You just take some sandpaper, some really, really fine grit sandpaper, and run it around that eye. I mean, I'm talking about, I don't if you've not messed with sandpaper, the higher the grit, like if it's 400 grit versus 800 grit, the higher the grit, the smoother the finish. You want to get as high as you can possibly get, and then use that to sand it. Now, I will also recommend that you make the sandpaper wet because that'll make it even more smooth in comparison. A sandpaper can actually rough things up before it smooths it out. But that's gonna be your biggest fail point when it comes to the rods. It's actually gonna be the eyes of the reel. And easiest way to find it, Q-tip it. Like I said, once a season, just go through all your rods, run that around there, look for torn cotton, and then take that as a chance to smooth it out. Because again, all these failures on this equipment is gonna happen at the most inconvenient time. I can't speak from experience. I know plenty of other people that can speak from experience. It's just something that happens. What about hooks and lures? If you were fishing with a lure and you've kept it for forever, you've had this thing since the dawn of time, or it's your very first one you bought. It was an expensive crankbait you got for Christmas, and somehow you've managed not to chuck it across the lake or get it stuck in a tree. The hooks on those eventually will rust, and a rusty hook is not sharp. A rusty hook will not penetrate a fish's mouth correctly. A dull hook is even worse. We joke a lot in the catfish community about having rubber hooks. Well, that's the easiest way to have a rubber hook. If it's completely dull, if the point is gone, it's not sharp anymore, it's not gonna hook a fish. But it doesn't go just for lures, obviously, it's for any hooks. I have sitting here in front of me a circle hook. If you look there, there's the point right here, and then there's also a barb further down the shank. I don't think it'll focus good enough. Hang on. There's a hook, and then you got a point here, and then further up right behind here is a barb. And that barb is important for keeping the fish on the hook, but that point not being sharp is gonna cost you fish. Now, what can you do to fix hooks maintenance wise? You really can't. There are some people that say you can sharpen your hooks with a file. You can't do that with ones like this where the tip is bent on purpose, where it's got like a beak tip. But if you have one that's purely a straight J where the point literally just comes out this way, you could, in theory, try to sharpen it. I have tried it before. But generally speaking, the hook's probably gonna be one of the cheapest things to replace. But when it comes to your lures, rather than throwing a lure away and replace it, it's actually cheaper to buy more treble hooks and just replace them. You have to get some depending on the lure, you're gonna have to use split ring pliers or something like that to put them on there. But uh doing that'll make a big difference. Now there's some things you can't, like if you're using a jig head or using like a spinner bait, You can't replace the hooks on those so much, um, because of the fact that lead is molded around the eyelet of that hook, right? But on things you can replace, it's treble hooks on crankbaits, jerk baits, all that good stuff. Or hey, I'm using this bass worm or this piece of this plastic bait, and I just need a sharper hook. Well, then just replace the hook. You know. But again, if somehow you've managed to keep this hook on for forever, and this is the only example, I guess, where it's something you take every trip. If you used a bunch of lures before you put them away, check the hooks. If you went catfishing for a whole day, you caught a bunch of fish, before you go on the next trip, check those hooks. Yeah, I mean, obviously, you don't want to change the hooks out at the end of a trip because then they're sitting exposed to air and moisture, humidity, all that good stuff. They might actually get dull before the next trip. But check it before you go. If they're not sharp, replace them. Again, if it's on lures, old lures, same thing. Check them. Those you generally speaking, you put lures back in a tackle box, right? So those ones you can kind of check before you go back in the box, because ideally your lure tackle box, sorry, ideally your tackle box isn't leaking water, so you're not gonna get moisture in there, so hopefully it won't rust. But if you're using older lures too, or ones that have paint on them, just inspect the paint and stuff on it. If it's not colored correctly, generally speaking, it's not gonna matter. The action's more important, but it has been proven in the past that color can make a difference. So if you got a lure that is, say it's a jigging spoon and it's chartreuse, well, once you knock that paint off, it's gray. It's not chartreuse anymore. If you got one that's got paint peeling off of it, or um, in the terms of like the old balsa wood lures, where or the hollow chamber stuff, if you have a crack in it and it starts taking on water, that lure is not going to work the same anymore. Some of them can be repaired to get rid of the cracks or replace the paint or peel off the old paint. Um, that'll make them work better and stay working longer. Not always. Obviously, sometimes you're gonna break one, you have to just replace it. Is what it is, right? But little checks like this can actually save you some money here because maybe you don't have to replace it. Maybe it just needs a little touch up paint, or maybe it just needs a little bit of glue on it or something. Stuff like that can save you, especially when you spend between $5 and $30 on a lure, depending on what you got. Right, something like that can save you some good money. But the biggest thing here, line maintenance will cost you the most. I cannot tell you how many times I've had somebody come up to me, "Hey, I went fishing. I've for the first time this year, in the very first cast, I broke off. Well, then I tied on again. I cast out again, and I broke off." Generally speaking, even if you're using a light line, if you're breaking off when you cast, there's an issue with the line. Not always. Sometimes the reel and engage while you're trying to cast, and obviously that can cost you a lure or something to break and fly off into the distance. But generally speaking, if you're breaking off while you're casting, or just while you're tying, or just while you're messing around, it's going to be a line issue. Man, even when you're fishing, actually, when you're fishing for that matter, line maintenance could be an issue. If you are fighting a fish and the line break and you reel it back in, if it is a clean break, as in it's not all curly cued, well, then you know it probably wasn't your knot. It means it was the line. Something somewhere on the line it broke, whether it be from touching a rock, which that one you can't control, right? But if your line is old, it can just snap off randomly. If especially when you put any kind of pressure on it, like gassing and whatnot. If you if your reel engages, it can break, stuff like that. But line maintenance will cost you the most. It's going to cost you lures when you truck them out. It's going to cost you fish when you lose them. Uh, and even dollar wise, if you're fishing with braid or fluorocarbon or something that's more expensive, this is where you're going to save the most money, generally speaking, because even though with the lures and stuff, you're able to save per lure and say, "Hey, I've used 10 crankbaits this year. I replaced the hooks for $1 a piece. I spent $10 a piece on those crankbaits." So it costs you $110 roughly for all those. But if I had to replace them every season, well, then I'd spend $100 every season as opposed to 10 just to replace the hooks. So I'm saving a net savings of $90, right? Line maintenance, if I have, especially, and this is really key if you have multiple rods, right? If it costs me between $5 and $10 for a spool of mono, no matter what, if I'm using 4 reels, I'm looking between $20 and $50 online per year. But if I use braid or I use fluorocarbon, where I can go, an extra season with it, because the way that line is, it's not as affected by uh, the sun or by moisture so much, then yeah, I may have spent $15 or $20 on it, but maybe I'm saving 50%. Or maybe I'm breaking even, maybe I'm getting the benefits of those lines without having to pay the price. But generally speaking, the more you fish in a year, the more likely you're gonna have to replace that line. Whether it be through it being damaged and you taking off the end pieces that are damaged and using more further down the reel, whether that be hey, I fished this much in the sun, in the rain throughout the whole year, and it's just time to replace it. Whether it be you're cutting more leaders on and off because you've changed lures 800 times and you've just made it too short, eventually you have to replace your line. But if you're using mono, I do recommend you change it once a season. Thankfully, mono is cheap, so it's not so bad. You can get OmniFlex is the Walmart house brand. I think it's like $3 a roll. It's not terrible line. Uh, Therefore, it's easy to replace because it's not as expensive. If you're using fluorocarbon or braid, if you're using braid, you can get multiple seasons on it. I have one reel that I have not respooled in 3 years, and it's working just fine. There's no visual wear and tear on it. It doesn't affect it by the sun as much as mono and fluorocarbon. I don't personally use fluorocarbon, pure straight fluorocarbon on a reel, but I know it doesn't do is not as affected as much either. Not as good as braid. Braid is the least affected by the sun. It is the most affected by wear and tear in terms of going through cover, in terms of abrasion resistance, stuff like that. That's where most of your issues with braid is going to be, is what you're fishing in, what you're fishing for, and what you're fishing with. Fluorocarbon, it is affected by the sun a smidge, but it is more affected by the fact that it's in water. If you leave mono or fluorocarbon in water, it is made out of plastic. Eventually, it's going to take on water and it's not going to work right. It's going to make it weak. But the biggest thing out of all those lines, the biggest enemy, like we talked about in the knots video, is heat. Heat will ruin fishing line. But like I said, mono is the absolute worst about being affected by everything you do when it comes to sun, rain, shine, all that good stuff. Mono is going to replace the most. You want to replace it at least once a season. Fluorocarbon, you can get 2 seasons out of. Braid, you can get as many seasons as you feel comfortable out of it. Now, the nice thing about braid, now I know you can't do this with mono because of the memory, and you probably can't do this with fluorocarbon because it has more memory than braid. But because braid has no memory, you can actually make it extend a lot longer by literally unspooling it off one reel and spooling onto another reel. You can literally double the life of your braid by respooling it onto another reel. If you literally your reel, you have your braid, you spooled it on this rod, you used it for a whole season or 2 seasons or 3 seasons. Okay, cool. I'm going to take this other rod I got. I'm going to take the tag in that I normally tie the lures to. Go ahead and put it on this reel and then just spool it on there backwards. Well, then you literally just gain 2 or 3 seasons off of that braid. That's where your money savings is going to be when it comes to lines. If you're spending extra money in the get go for fluorocarbon or for braid, but braid especially, you can extend it out through stuff like that and get multiple seasons out of it. It makes a big difference. Rhonda, good morning. Driving to the dock. I hope that means you're going fishing today. I really do. Jody, good morning. Hope you guys are getting something from this. I am definitely not awake. But hey, We're having a good time, right? We're talking about fishing. It's all good. But yeah, again, line maintenance is going to be where you get to save the most money. It's also going to be where it costs the most money initially, typically speaking, especially if you decide to do something with braid or fluorocarbon, simply because those are more expensive to start with, but those have the most ability to save you money in the long run. If I spend $30 on a batch of braid and I get 6 seasons out of it, as opposed to, hey, I spent $5 or $10 on this mono, but I've had to replace it every single year. Well, say it was a $10 spool of mono over 6 years. That was $60. If I spent $30 and made it over 6 years, I saved $30. Now, granted, it's it's over the course of 6 years, but I know because of this, I'm not going to lose fish. I'm not going to lose many lures. If I'm using old line or old mono and I'm chucking $5 crankbaits and I sling four of them out in the lake, well, that just cost me $20 more, you know, and that's not okay. That's not what we want. The idea with this gear maintenance is to save you money. And again, just for long story short, if you got a rod, try to be careful with the tip, but check the eyes every season with a Q-tip. If you have a reel, especially if you're fishing saltwater, you want to take it apart at least once a season, clean it out, lubricate it, all that good stuff. Check for broken pieces. There's gonna be diagrams, videos, and stuff that you can look to help to take those apart. So don't feel nervous about that part. It is not as hard as it looks. It's not as daunting as it may look when you look at the diagram and there's 800 pieces on it. It's not a big deal. Lures, replacing the hooks on lures is going to save you money, especially when you're dealing with expensive crankbaits and stuff like that. But yes, be aware you're not always gonna be able to replace your hooks. You're not always gonna be able to replace your pieces on a lure simply because of the way they're made. Obviously, jig heads. That's where the biggest issue there is. It's hard. Actually, it's impossible really to replace the hooks on those unless they're a jointed hook where the jig head itself has actually got like a little eyelet for the hook to attach to. That's the only way you can do that. But when it comes to line, that's when you don't want to change it the most. It's going to cause you the most problems. It's where it's going to save you most people the most money. Because if you're not a lure fisherman, if you're just fishing with cut bait, live bait, all that good stuff, you're replacing the hooks no matter what because you can't really save the hook itself. So at that point, the line is the thing where you get your savings from. But out of all of this, the idea is to keep your gear in tip top shape. So when you are out there fishing, you're not losing fish. You're not throwing lures across the lake. You're not having things break while you're on the water trying to fish with it. And it'll help you catch more fish simply because it'll put you more on the water, keep you on the water longer rather, without getting frustrated for things breaking. So hope that helped somebody today. Yeah, again, lure maintenance, rod maintenance, reel maintenance, all that good stuff. It's something that we can do outside of our fishing trip to not only extend our equipment to save us money in the long run from not having to replace it, but little things you have to do to some good practices rather for the seasons to be able to get you on more fish and keep you on those fish when you finally get there. Oh, nice. 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 Well, we hope you catch a fish. I hope you catch a fish. I'm sure everybody else here hopes you catch fish too, but yeah, nothing wrong with the good cooking either. I know we're doing biscuits and uh, eggs and bacon this morning for breakfast ourselves, and then I think we're gonna take Josie to the aquarium today. So it's gonna be fun. And Thursday. I'm off Thursday, so I plan on going fishing. I don't know if I'm going to kayak yet or if I'm gonna do what I'm gonna fish for. I haven't decided yet. Uh, Not sure if it's supposed to be hot or not. I do need to be better about filming my trips though. I know I've been doing a lot more streams lately, and it's definitely cutting into my production of stuff for YouTube and whatnot. Oh, you know what? That's a good point, Shirley. I wish I didn't even think about that. Yes, your external equipment makes a big difference too. Your nets, your pliers, all that good stuff. It's stuff that you need to keep an eye on as well. Did not even think about that. Ah, that's not good. Yeah, so fishing net obviously it's got a handle. You don't want it broken. gonna make a big difference. You definitely like Shirley made the point here. Make sure your net isn't cracked. It does happen. Uh, yeah, you don't want that. Well, you don't want, I guess you don't want the netting ripped on it either, right? But on your pliers, you don't want your pliers to have rusty screws or uh, rusty teeth or broken teeth because that can cause more problems than it actually can help. Um, if you got something that's got a handle on it that's rubber and the rubber starts breaking off or wearing off, and it'll make it uncomfortable to put in your hand. If you got something that has like a lanyard on it or a connection for keeping it attached to your kayak or your fishing vest or something like that, obviously those ropes can wear out over time. Paracord can wear out over time. Anchor ropes for those fishing on a boat. You want to make sure your anchor rope's not got knots on it. Make sure it's not frayed. Make sure the tines aren't bent straight out and then not able to be used. Yeah, I'm talking to you, Jody. But that's additional savings, right? Obviously, you don't want to be replacing your net that costs $30 every single time, or your $5 pliers every single time. Um, but for most people, most of the gear maintenance issues they're going to have is going to be from the rods, the reels, the lures, the line, the basics, the four things you need to fish, right? That's where most people are going to be able to save some money. It's where most people are going to be able to uh, easily maintain their equipment so they can make it last longer. Because for most people, that's going to be where they spent the most money to get invested into the sport of fishing. Oh man, that was rough between the cat howling at the start of this and me not being awake. But yeah, like I said, that's pretty much it. You guys got any questions for me? Anything we want to talk about? Oh, wait, some announcements. So the next episode is going to be next Sunday. I do work this coming Saturday, so we're going to do the next episode on a Sunday as well, August the 20th. Um, for some of you may know if you're up to date with everything, uh, Kenneth Powell still needing prayers and good vibes. He had a stroke a while back, still recovering from that. Bobcat Britt just had a bypass surgery Friday. I believe it was a triple bypass. They do have a raffle to help him out because he's a self-employed individual. So they are doing a raffle to try to get some money for him so he can recover safely and not worry about taking care of the bills. Trophy Seekers Outdoors is the one that's taking the money for that. I made a post on made a thing on the community post. It has the links for it. Um, and he has it on his page as well, both on Facebook and on YouTube. Uh, you can help out, reach out that way. The way that raffle is doing, every $5 gets you a ticket. Yeah, lots of good stuff going on. I know the grand prize is it was an Uncle Lou rod, a $100 Amazon gift card, and I think a $25 Cabela's gift card. Um, and the Uncle Lou rod's like $130 value, so it's like $250 to the winner to start with, uh, to the grand prize winner. But they got other stuff too. I know there was at least 3 more rods that were donated and a bunch gift cards and such, which is pretty cool. Um, I'm not 100% sure. I couldn't hear him when he was talking about it yesterday in his tournament. I don't remember if that's all going to one person or if it's a bunch of different items. I assume it's a bunch of different items. Um, but yeah, if you want to help out with that, I know they're reaching out for help with that. Um, this is probably the last episode of the Anyone Can Fish series for the beginner fisherman getting into fishing. Uh, so we're gonna do more branched out stuff, uh, topics in the future. Not necessarily pertaining to any one species of fish, but not necessarily pertaining to one specific technique or anything either. I'm gonna do some kayak episodes, uh, about my experiences with kayaks and certain topics with that. I also want to do one about scents, um, mostly for artificial lure type scents. I mean, are those actually doing anything? Versus obviously, if you're using cut bait or something natural, obviously that's gonna work. It is what it is. But those bottled up, crayfish scented stuff, does that actually work? Stuff like that. Studies that prove otherwise. Um, and we got a bunch of cool stuff like that. There's gonna be videos out there for different species pertaining to different folks, but interesting studies. Like there's a study about the mortality rate when it comes to bass tournaments, which absolutely screams the importance of catch photo release and how I'm a bigger fan of these kayak tournaments doing the length or having it live streamed with the weight as opposed to doing these live weigh-ins. These fish get stressed out being in the boat all day, and I can't remember which college did it off the top of my head, but they did a study and it was the numbers are absolutely devastating. So, stuff like that. And eventually I want to do a debate about invasive species, how big of a problem they actually are, stuff like that. Studies that suggest different facts and bring that stuff to light. It's kind of the whole point of the show in the first place. But I thought they would be good to start with the beginner series for people getting into the sport, um, because that's stuff that a lot of people don't talk about. If you've been fishing a long time, it's hard to go back and show somebody or explain to somebody the basics because you've been doing it for so long. That's with anything. If you're an expert chess player and you're trying to teach somebody how to play chess, well, it's really hard to dial it back, right? And not just completely crush them every game. Stuff like that. So that was kind of the point of this series. And like I said, I'm pretty sure this is gonna be the last episode for that. I'm not sure yet what we're gonna talk about next week, but I'm looking forward to it. Well, with that being said, since the questions have stopped rolling in and the comments have stopped rolling in, I'm gonna go ahead and call it for today. But thank you for joining me. I hope everybody has a fantastic day. Hope everybody has a fantastic week. You've been watching the Yakkity Yak Fishing Podcast, and we'll see y'all next time. Everybody have a good day.